Who were the Sumerians? Long before Egypt built its pyramids or Babylon rose to power, the Sumerians thrived in the heart of Mesopotamia. They invented writing, built massive ziggurats, and told stories of gods, kings, and creation that still echo today. But who were these mysterious people? Where did they come from? And why did their advanced civilization suddenly vanish? In this video, we uncover the secrets of the Sumerians, the world's first known civilization, whose forgotten legacy still shapes our world in ways you never imagined. Stay tuned as we journey back to the cradle of civilization. When we think of the roots of civilization, many minds immediately turn to Egypt, Rome, or Greece. But long before the pyramids rose from the sands, and before Caesar crossed the Rubicon, there was a mysterious and brilliant civilization nestled between two rivers in what is now modern-day Iraq, Sumer. The Sumerians, often considered the first true civilization in human history, laid the foundations for writing, law, government, literature, and city building. But who were they really? And why did they suddenly vanish, leaving behind only ruins, myths, and riddles? This deep exploration uncovers the identity, innovations, beliefs, and disappearance of the Sumerians, a people whose influence still echoes across time. 1. The land of Sumer. The Sumerians lived in southern Mesopotamia, a region whose name literally means land between rivers, specifically the Tigris and Euphrates. This fertile crescent, though often dry and prone to flooding, was ideal for early agriculture. It gave rise to the first cities humanity ever built. Sumer was not a unified nation, but rather a collection of city-states like Ur, Uruk, Eridu, Lagash, and Nippur. Each of these cities had its own ruler, army, and patron deity. Despite frequent rivalries and wars, they shared a common language, culture, and religious system. According to archaeological records, the Sumerians emerged around 4500 BCE, although their cultural peak occurred between 3100 to 2000 BCE. But their roots may go even deeper, with some scholars speculating that Sumerian culture might have stemmed from earlier indigenous groups or mysterious pre-Sumerian peoples. 2. Where did they come from? The origins of the Sumerians remain a historical puzzle. Their language, Sumerian, is a linguistic isolate. It has no known relation to any other language on Earth. This uniqueness has baffled scholars for centuries. Some have suggested they migrated from Central Asia. Others propose links to the Indus Valley or even East Africa. But no consensus exists. This linguistic mystery has led to fascinating and sometimes fringe theories. Some ancient astronaut theorists claim the Sumerians were connected to extraterrestrial visitors, pointing to their advanced knowledge of astronomy and mythic tales of gods descending from the heavens. While mainstream scholars reject such ideas, they underline how mysterious the Sumerian people still are. 3. The birth of civilization. The Sumerians didn't just farm and settle, they innovated. They pioneered many aspects of modern civilization. Writing system, cuneiform around 3200 BCE. Sumerians created cuneiform, the first known writing system. They began by pressing wedge-shaped symbols into clay tablets to record trade, laws, prayers, and stories. This invention changed human history forever, transitioning society from oral tradition to recorded knowledge. The first cities like Uruk, may have had populations exceeding 50,000, enormous for the ancient world. These were true urban centers with marketplaces, temples, schools, and bureaucracies. Government and law. They developed the earliest known legal codes, predating Hammurabi. Kings ruled through divine right, but were expected to uphold justice and maintain ma'at, order and balance. Mathematics and astronomy. The Sumerians created a base 60 sexagesimal number system, This is why we have 60 seconds in a minute and 360 degrees in a circle. Their astronomical charts tracked planetary movements and eclipses with surprising accuracy. Irrigation and engineering. The Sumerians transformed arid lands into farmlands using advanced irrigation, canals, and levees. They domesticated animals, grew wheat and barley, and built roads to connect city-states. For religion and the gods. Sumerian religion was deeply intertwined with daily life. Every city was built around a ziggurat, a massive temple complex dedicated to a god or goddess. These gods weren't distant or abstract. They were powerful, emotional, and involved in human affairs. Key deities included Anu, the god of heaven, father of the gods. Enlil, god of wind and earth, the king of the gods. Inanna, Ishtar, goddess of love, war, and fertility, one of the most complex and revered deities in the ancient world. Enki, Ea, god of wisdom, water, and creation. The Sumerians believed humans were created by the gods to serve them. Myths like the Enuma Elish and the Epic of Gilgamesh explore divine conflict, mortality, creation, and the afterlife. These myths would later influence Babylonian, Assyrian, and even biblical narratives. In particular, the Epic of Gilgamesh, the world's oldest known literary work, tells the story of a king who seeks immortality. It features a great flood, a serpent that steals eternal life, and a search for divine wisdom, parallels that appear in Genesis and other religious texts. 5. Daily life and culture. The Sumerians weren't just priests, kings, and scribes. They were farmers, bakers, artists, warriors, and traders. Social structure. Society was hierarchical. At the top were nobles and priests, followed by merchants, artisans, and farmers. Slaves, often prisoners of war or debtors, were at the bottom. Education. Boys from elite families attended Aduba's scribal schools, where they studied language, math, and literature. Education was the path to becoming a scribe, a prestigious career. Art and music. The Sumerians made intricate jewelry, statues, and cylinder seals. They loved music and used harps, lyres, and flutes in rituals and celebrations. Trade. Sumer was rich in crops, but lacked natural resources like timber or metal. So they traded extensively with regions as far as the Indus Valley, Anatolia, and the Arabian Peninsula. 6. The mysterious disappearance. Despite their brilliance, the Sumerians didn't last. By around 2000 BCE, their cities began to decline, and their language slowly faded, replaced by Akkadian and later Babylonian. What happened? Environmental degradation. Overfarming and irrigation may have led to salinization of the soil, reducing crop yields and triggering famine. Invasion. The Akkadians, a Semitic people from the north, eventually conquered Sumer around 2334 BCE under Sargon the Great. While Sumerian culture persisted under Akkadian rule, its independence was lost. Political instability. Constant warfare between city-states weakened the region. Ur, for instance, was sacked multiple times. Cultural absorption. Later civilizations admired and adopted Sumerian practices, but they also replaced the Sumerians' identity. Over time, they were forgotten, buried under layers of conquest, time, and dust. It wasn't until the 19th century that archaeologists began unearthing Sumerian cities and decoding cuneiform tablets, rediscovering a civilization once thought lost forever. 7. Legacy of the Sumerians. The impact of the Sumerians is profound. Writing. Without Sumerian cuneiform, we might never have had written history, literature, or law codes. Urban planning. They invented the blueprint for organized cities. Mythology. Their stories influenced later religious texts and mythologies, from Babylon to the Bible. Law and justice. Early legal traditions trace back to Sumerian systems of justice and kingship. Even their scientific and mathematical contributions continue to influence how we measure time and space today. 8. Why the Sumerians still matter. The story of the Sumerians isn't just a tale of the past. It's a mirror reflecting our present. They show us that civilization is not inevitable. It must be built, protected, and sustained. They remind us that knowledge, faith, innovation, and culture can bloom even in harsh environments. But perhaps most importantly, they raise deeper questions about human origins, forgotten wisdom, and the fragility of memory. How could such a foundational civilization be so thoroughly lost to time? It challenges us to ask, how many other ancient peoples have vanished without a trace? What ancient knowledge have we yet to rediscover? Are we truly more advanced, or simply building upon their forgotten brilliance? The Sumerians were not just the first civilization, they were a monumental leap in the human story. Their legacy is not one of ruin, but of resilience and revelation. Through them, we understand that history is not linear. It spirals, returns, and sometimes, with patience and excavation, reveals the divine genius of those who came before us. To study the Sumerians is to peer into a time when humanity took its first organized steps toward culture, science, governance, and spirituality. They laid the foundation upon which the modern world rests. Yet for thousands of years, they were nearly erased from human memory. Their cities were buried under dust. Their language disappeared. Their gods became echoes in other traditions. But their brilliance endured, written in clay, carved in stone, and whispered through myth. Who were the Sumerians? They were farmers and philosophers, builders and believers, scientists and storytellers. They were the first to ask the great questions, and the first to write down the answers. And now, thousands of years later, we are only beginning to remember them. 1. The cradle of civilization. Located in the southern part of Mesopotamia, present-day Iraq, the land of Sumer was part of the Fertile Crescent, a region often described as the cradle of civilization. The Sumerians emerged here around 4500 BCE, eventually developing into a full-fledged civilization by 3100 BCE. But to simply say they were the first is to underestimate the radical transformation they brought to humanity. They didn't just survive, they created. Before them, humans lived in scattered tribes and small villages. The Sumerians invented cities. They didn't merely speak, they wrote. They didn't only believe, they institutionalized religion. They didn't just live by instinct, they governed by law. 2. The builders of cities and systems. The Sumerians are credited with building the first true cities in human history. Cities like Uruk, Eridu, Lagash, and Nippur rose out of the plains like miracles of human organization. These weren't simple settlements. They had roads, canals, marketplaces, defensive walls, and towering temples called ziggurats. These cities formed independent city-states, each with its own ruler and deity. With urbanization came complexity. The Sumerians developed bureaucracies to manage food storage, trade, and labor, tax systems to support the temple and state, legal systems such as the Code of Ur-Nammu, one of the earliest known law codes, specialization of labor, with distinct roles for priests, scribes, artisans, soldiers, and merchants. Their cities were not only architectural marvels, but also spiritual centers, scientific laboratories, and political experiments. This was not merely evolution. It was innovation on a civilizational scale. 3. Inventors of writing and knowledge. The Sumerians created cuneiform, the first known system of writing, around 3200 BCE. Using a stylus made of reed, they pressed wedge-shaped marks into clay tablets. At first, writing served to track trade and inventory, but soon it evolved into a tool for law, literature, philosophy, and mythology. Through cuneiform, the Sumerians documented business transactions and treaties, religious rituals and hymns, medical diagnoses and prescriptions, agricultural manuals, epic literature like the Epic of Gilgamesh. This leap from oral to written culture was transformative. It allowed ideas to be stored, shared, debated, and remembered. It shifted power from the spoken word to the written record. With writing, humanity gained memory beyond the individual, collective, eternal memory. 4. Seekers of cosmic order. Sumerian religion was both profound and practical. Their gods were reflections of nature and human emotion, divine forces that governed the sky, the rivers, fertility, love, war, and wisdom. Each city had a patron deity housed in its ziggurat, which acted as a spiritual and political hub. Among their deities were Anu, god of the heavens; Enlil, god of air and storms; Enki, god of water, wisdom, and magic; Inanna, later Ishtar, goddess of love and war; Nanna, god of the moon. But Sumerian religion was more than mythology. It was about Ma'at, the balance of divine and human order. Temples managed economic resources and set moral expectations. The priesthood wasn't just ceremonial, it governed agriculture, redistribution, and social norms. This spiritual system shaped future civilizations. Babylonian, Assyrian, and even Hebrew traditions absorbed and adapted Sumerian myth. Echoes of Sumerian flood myths appear in Genesis. Their gods, laws, and rituals laid the groundwork for the spiritual systems that followed. 5. Pioneers of science, math, and time. The Sumerians were astute observers of nature. They studied the stars, seasons, and cycles of life, seeking patterns in the universe. Key contributions include Base 60 mathematics. Our current system of measuring time, 60 seconds per minute, 60 minutes per hour, comes directly from Sumer. Lunar calendar. Their calendar guided agriculture, festivals, and commerce. Astronomy. They mapped constellations and tracked planetary movements. Venus, Jupiter, and Mars were recorded and mythologized. Geometry and engineering, used in land division, architecture, and irrigation design. They believed the cosmos was ordered, and their scientific curiosity was a sacred act, an attempt to read the mind of the gods through the language of numbers and stars. 6. Scribes, artists, and storytellers. Culture flourished in Sumer. Their art, music, poetry, and literature reflected both everyday life and existential inquiry. Music was central to ritual life. They played harps, lyres, and flutes. Musical notation even appears on cuneiform tablets. Sculpture and reliefs. Art depicted gods, kings, and myths in elegant, abstract forms. Cylinder seals. Small carved stones rolled over wet clay to mark ownership, early forms of signature and branding. But their literature remains their greatest cultural treasure. The Epic of Gilgamesh, written over 4,000 years ago, is humanity's first great story. It wrestles with themes of friendship, mortality, divine justice, and the pursuit of eternal life. In Gilgamesh, we see the first recorded human asking, "What is the meaning of life?" 7. Not a fall, but a transformation. Around 2000 BCE, Sumer began to decline. Why? Historians point to a mix of environmental degradation. Over-irrigation caused salinization of the soil, reducing agricultural output. Political instability. Constant warfare among city-states weakened the region. Invasion. The Akkadians, followed by the Amorites and others, conquered Sumerian cities. But Sumer did not vanish. It was absorbed. The Akkadians borrowed Sumerian culture, religion, and script. Babylon later inherited these systems. Assyria built upon them. Even the Hebrews, Greeks, and Persians carried traces of Sumerian influence. Thus, Sumer did not fall. It transformed. It seeded the future. 8. The forgotten and rediscovered. For centuries, the Sumerians were forgotten. Their cities became buried under dust and sand. Their language died. Their myths were muted. It wasn't until the 19th century that archaeologists began to uncover this lost world. In places like Ur, Eridu, and Uruk, they unearthed temples, statues, and tens of thousands of clay tablets. Scholars like Henry Rawlinson and George Smith painstakingly deciphered cuneiform, opening a door to the ancient world. What they found stunned them. Evidence of a civilization far older and more advanced than previously believed. The discovery of the Epic of Gilgamesh alone changed everything. Suddenly, the Bible was no longer the oldest written account of a great flood. Suddenly, the origins of myth, kingship, and civilization pointed not to Greece or Egypt, but deeper to Sumer. 9. The spiral of history. The story of Sumer is not a straight line. It is a spiral, a reminder that knowledge can be lost and found again, that greatness can be forgotten until the earth gives it back, that time does not move only forward, but inward and outward, like the orbits of stars or the rings of a tree. What the Sumerians taught us is not just how to build, but how to wonder. They asked, why do we die? What lies beyond the stars? What is justice? Who made us, and why? They wrote the first answers. Not final ones, but beginnings. Foundations. Their clay tablets are the bedrock upon which we built law, science, literature, and faith. And now, thousands of years later, we are only beginning to remember them. 10. A legacy not of ruin, but of revelation. The Sumerians remind us that civilization is fragile, but genius is eternal. Though their cities crumbled, their ideas endured. Though their names were forgotten, their inventions remain. Their story is not one of decline, but of deep and buried wisdom. A lost chapter in the human book, now slowly retranslated. Their legacy calls out from beneath the earth, to respect the land or risk collapse, to seek truth through both faith and reason, to record, to question, to remember. Who were the Sumerians? They were the dawn of organized thought, the spark of written word, the blueprint of urban life. They were the bridge between myth and science, between ritual and record. They were the farmers who became philosophers, the builders who became astronomers, the worshippers who became writers. They were not only the first civilization, they were a divine experiment in human potential. And in this age of rediscovery, as we unearth their wisdom, we are reminded, the ancient does not die. It waits to be remembered. The story of the Sumerians is more than ancient history. It's the foundation of everything that came after. From writing and law to astronomy and mythology, their legacy is woven into the fabric of human civilization. As we rediscover who they were, we begin to understand who we are. If you found this journey through Sumerian history eye-opening, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the ancient world. Drop a comment below with your thoughts or questions. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep seeking the forgotten truths of our human past.